Hi, everyone. I'm going to give you all just a few more seconds to kind of filter in, and I apologize for being just a few minutes past the hour, getting a little late start this afternoon, but welcome to Berkeley time. By way of introduction, I'm Chelsea Hackett. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the outreach coordinator in the JD admissions office. And you are all joining me today for the info session with the Berkeley Center for Law and Business, or BCLB, as sometimes you'll hear it be called for short. I'm joined today by Adam Sterling, who's the executive director of BCLB, or the Center for Law and Business. And we'll also be joined by a current student here in a few minutes. And I'm sure that when the student joins, it'll give them a chance to introduce themselves. With that, in terms of ground rules today, I've disabled the chat. And so if you have any questions during the session, you're welcome to use the Q&A feature. It just is a little bit easier for us to kind of manage things that way. But other than that, you'll see that this is being recorded. So I'll be sending out this info session afterwards. And I also wanted to invite you to our event next week. We have a series of panels on the law school's experience. So as you're continuing to learn more about law school and Berkeley law in particular, I invite you to join those sessions. But with that, I will turn things over to Adam.
Thank you, Chelsea. Okay, and I'm going to just put my email address in the chat box. So if anyone wants to reach out, schedule time to speak one-on-one about Berkeley, about law school, about a legal career, I'm happy to chat with you. I'm also going to just do a few slides. Let me share my screen. Just give me a moment here. All right. So as Chelsea mentioned, I am at the Berkeley Center for Law and Business, and I think Berkeley is unique. We have a number of centers, and really, I think it's best to think about the centers almost as departments. So I oversee the business law department, everything from curriculum to extracurriculars to alumni relations. We have other fantastic centers, Center for Energy and the Environment, Law and Technology, our Human Rights Center. So just, I think it really, areas that the law school has had kind of focus, strengths is where we've built centers around it. And it just does a really great job of serving as a bridge between our students, our faculty, our alumni, and then kind of the broader campus community. This picture is actually from an event we did a few years ago on sports, law, and business up at the Berkeley football stadium. And then that's 3 of our students, all who are now lawyers practicing, doing really neat things. And then with them is Andre Iguodala, who now I guess plays once again for the Golden State Warriors, but spoke about investing and sports-related startups. So we're at the heart of Silicon Valley and other things. And I think one of the best parts of Berkeley is the tremendous people we bring on campus to speak with our students. And this is one example. A little bit more about me. So as Chelsea mentioned, I'm the executive director of the Center for Law and Business. I also oversee executive education at the law school. So that's all of our programs that we offer non-degree earnings for basically practicing attorneys or other practitioners. We have programs in venture finance, sustainability, artificial intelligence. So kind of learning after you've graduated from school. My background, so prior to graduate school, I actually in college started a nonprofit in the human rights space and then worked in DC for a number of years and then felt I wanted to go back to grad school. I had taken the LSAT my junior year of college because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then I kept delaying it. And then I think my LSAT score was about to expire. So I applied to a few schools. Berkeley was one I thankfully got into. They were nice enough to allow me to defer a year. And then I think that was like 6 years later. I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a lawyer long-term. So right before I took the GMAT and then ended up applying to business school. So I was at Berkeley for 4 years and I did a JD and an MBA. While I was there, I became really interested in kind of the Silicon Valley tech startup scene. I tried to do my own tech startup in business school because you have a lot of free time in business school, but it failed. And so I ended up practicing law out in the Bay Area at a law firm called Gunderson Detmer, where I represented both startups and then the venture capitalists, the investors who invest in startups. And I did that for a few years. And then 6 years ago, I got the opportunity to come back to Berkeley and run the center. And it's really been a tremendous experience of a lifetime. We've really invested in Berkeley's business law program, but still have kind of maintained that public interest spirit. If you follow the rankings, US News 2 years ago started ranking business law programs. We were number 4 overall, number 1 for all public universities. This last year, the second year of those rankings, we were number 3, still number 1 for all public institutions. So it's something we're really proud of. And then, as I'm sure you'll hear others say, I'm sure Aaron will echo this when he joins us. He's a current second-year student. It's just a really phenomenal community. My time at law school, it was the best 2.5 years of my life. I say 2.5 because that first half year, that first semester, it's a bit of a transition no matter where you go. But I just really fell in love with the place, and it's been a home to me. And I'm still obviously here today. I left a lucrative practice in the private sector to come and be part of this community again. I met my significant other here. She is an immigration attorney. We've just had our first child, so a Berkeley law baby, and still probably our closest group of 30 or so friends are classmates of ours. So the community is just really special, and I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about that. I'm not going to read this. This is our mission statement. Basically, we do a lot of really cool stuff, from looking at financial fraud, corporate governance, to venture capital. I actually co-taught 4 years ago one of the university's first blockchain courses. So we're at the forefront of innovation and things like that. We have probably the most robust sustainability curriculum around ESG and sustainability, if that's something you're interested in. Paul Weiss, which is one of the top law firms, they actually just started a new institute for sustainability, and they selected Berkeley Law and our center as their inaugural academic partner. So of all the universities they could have partnered with for this, they selected us, and they actually, as part of that, is going to be a new scholarship for students interested in corporate sustainability. So information on that will be available soon. Just some responsibilities of our center. As I mentioned, curriculum development, programming for you all, for alumni, for practitioners, certainly scholarship and research. Some of our key areas of focus, certainly startups, venture capital, entrepreneurship. Our Business and Society Institute, which is part of the center, is responsible for all things sustainability. We do a ton of work still in kind of traditional capital markets, from IPOs, initial public offerings, M&A. We've done a lot looking at SPACs, if that's something you follow. And then over the last few years, we've really done a lot in the space of financial fraud. We host a really fun annual conference called Fraud Fest, where we kind of bring journalists and researchers together to look at kind of hot topics in financial fraud. Some of the really student initiatives, sorry, ignore that student mixer part. So if you do come, we'll have plenty of mixers for you. We support our business law journal, which is actually the largest journal, I believe, on campus, and something that a lot of students will participate in. As I mentioned, the sports and entertainment law journal is something we often support. We host something called the Leadership Lunch Series. So each fall semester, and I'll put something up on the screen in a moment, we bring leaders, general counsels, which is usually the top lawyer at an organization, to campus to come meet with and speak to our students. And then usually in the spring semester, we bring different law firms to campus. We support the new community law clinic here, which is one of our clinics where you actually get to work with startups, nonprofits, and other entrepreneurs and provide actual legal services. You may learn about our SLIPS program, which are our student legal projects. One of those, and one of the more popular ones, is something called the Startup Law Initiative, where as a first-year student, you actually get to work with new companies to incorporate those companies, to do trainings for those companies on startup law. So that's a really fun one. We have a Women in Business Law Initiative, which has a mentorship program, conferences, just a ton of things. And then all of our student groups, and there are so many, we support all of their kind of programming in the world of business law. So there's a lot there. And then just to talk about, because we actually just wrapped it up, I just want to throw something on the screen here. And hi, Aaron. I'll introduce you in just a moment. Give me a second here. What I want to show you is, so we just wrapped up our leadership lunch series. Usually these are live and on campus, but basically what we did was we brought kind of the top lawyers from a bunch of organizations to meet with our students and give talks. So just you can see here's a few that came this semester. So General Counsel of DocuSign, Hopin, which is a competitor to Zoom. Number of these folks are alumni. Stephen Johnson's the #2 at American Airlines. Kristen is a good friend, General Counsel of Lyft. Jeremiah, capital G, that's one of Google's big investment funds. Shana Simmons at Simons at Everlaw, which is a really cool legal tech company. Josh Faddis here of Viva Systems. I'm actually working on a case study about Viva Systems. They were the first public company last year to convert from a corporation to a public benefit corporation, which is a new style of corporation that is accountable not just to shareholders, but other stakeholders like employees, communities, and the like. A few more here. Nobel Foods, Kristen is one of my best friends. She was a classmate of mine. They are basically designing an alternative protein for cheeses. So you can just see a ton of cool stuff. Lydia Galbraith, she's a recent alum, 2017. She's general counsel of a really cool company called Bitwise Industries. And what they do is work with communities like all around the country, largely communities that are kind of underrepresented in the tech space, and help them build out tech ecosystems. It's a really cool organization, Bitwise Industries. And so that's just one semester's worth of guests. And so I think really being here and our connection to the industry is one of the perks. And so what I want to do now is stop sharing, and I want to introduce my guest for this program, and then we'll just take questions from you all. Aaron Altman. Aaron's a second year at Berkeley Law. So this is his first year on campus taking classes. His first year as a 1L was during the pandemic, so he were attending Berkeley Law at Zoom University. But Aaron, thanks for joining us, and maybe I'll kick things off. Tell us a bit about your journey to law school. What did you do before? And then if you can maybe focus on why you selected Berkeley Law.
Yeah. So hello, everyone. I'm Aaron. I'm a 2L. Before law school, I worked at a company called Carvana in the legal department. I wanted to take some time to study for the LSAT and also get some legal experience to see sort of what lawyering is all about. And I've always sort of been interested in like the intersection of law and business. So Carvana presented me with a great opportunity to be a legal analyst and primarily handled consumer litigation and all sorts of regulatory matters for the company. The used car industry is very regulated. So a bunch of interesting issues for a company that's trying to be innovative and disrupt a pretty traditional industry. And was fortunate enough to get great experience there. My direct supervisor is actually a Berkeley Law alum. So that was sort of my first taste of what life would be like at Berkeley Law and sort of the career aspects and sort of where it could take you. And so applied to law school, eventually chose Berkeley after talking to Adam and talking to my boss. And I think a lot of what attracted me here is it seemed like everyone seemed to echo the community at Berkeley and how everyone seems to meet lifelong friends here and stuff and colleagues. And so that was definitely something that was very attractive to me, was sort of the collegial atmosphere.
Yeah.
And then also the connection to the Bay Area. I was interested in coming out here and working with some of the companies like that you mentioned on the leadership lunch talks, doing interesting things, and sort of Berkeley's connection to that community and sort of being just outside of or in that hub of innovation was really exciting and ultimately attracted me here.
Love it, Aaron. And I wonder if this rang true to you at all. I remember when I was looking at law schools, right? It was almost like, well, I love the collegiality of Berkeley Law. I love the going to a public university and its commitment to the public interest. And I'll go there maybe despite it not having the strongest business law program. And I think now it's right. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves, but have you felt that, right? That not only is it a top-notch business law program, but you just feel connected to the public aspect of it?
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that the school does particularly well in terms of the business curriculum is sort of the emergence of these one-unit courses that are usually taught by leading practitioners in whatever field. For example, I took one on cryptocurrency last semester, and it was taught by like the leading attorney in the country for a couple weeks that's dealing with the regulation of crypto, or whether it should be regulated at all, or how. So I think that is something that is unique and gets you exposure to sort of these leading practitioners and allows for networking along with learning about sort of these cutting edge topics that are emerging in the news with meme coins and stuff. So it's interesting getting to learn about things that are making headlines and learning them from people that are experts in their field and tackling these issues head on.
Yeah, it's a great point. I would encourage you all to at the schools you're considering to take a look at kind of you can just Google schedule of classes and it's almost always public and look at some of I think especially the electives, right? Because at every school you'll have your civil procedure, your contracts, your criminal law, but I think where schools really differentiate themselves is in the electives. And to Aaron's point, what we started doing a few years ago to really bring in kind of leading practitioners is these one-unit classes, which is about 14 hours of class time. And sometimes it's condensed over kind of a boot camp weekend. And we get to bring in really great folks. So Aaron mentioned our crypto class. We have the head of trust and safety at TikTok teaching a class on basically regulating technology. We've got Judge Jed Rakoff of the Southern District of New York, who's kind of like the federal judge of prosecuting federal crimes of financial fraud and otherwise, teaching a class called Where Civil and Criminal Codes Collide. He flies out every year for that. So I think it's a great point, Aaron, definitely. And I'd encourage folks to take a look at our schedule of classes and others. So, and most law students, after their first year, they'll intern somewhere, and then after their second year, they'll intern somewhere else. And that often where they intern after their second year of law school is usually where they end up working after law school. So, can you tell us a bit what you did last summer and what you plan to do next summer?
Yeah. So last summer, after my 1L year, I worked at Morrison & Forster, big law firm in San Francisco, and then spent a couple weeks at Facebook, now Meta, in their integrity and security department, which is really interesting, and sort of what all the Facebook issues kind of seem to revolve around that, which was very exciting. And next summer I'll be working at Gibson Dunn in San Francisco. So I'm really excited about that.
Okay, Aaron, favorite class so far, business law related, and favorite class non-business law related? And we won't share this with any of your professors.
Business law related, probably business associations. Kind of touching on what you mentioned about public interest, I think it's interesting how so many of the issues today around the law and business are kind of about this intersection of public interest and where corporations play a role in that. And so I particularly like sort of that angle of the class. And also I really loved the professor and found it just fascinating. And then favorite non-business law class was probably civil procedure. That's probably not the most common answer. But I think it's really important to understand how cases are brought. And I think I had a slightly deeper appreciation for it working before, particularly in litigation, because almost all the cases would get thrown out for procedural matters. So I kind of understood the importance of it going in, like, practically. But I just really like that class, and I want to, I aspire to be a litigator, so I found it to be to be particularly relevant to what I want to do.
Love it. And I asked the question because I actually, we encourage our students to really have a balanced class load. And I actually, so our center oversees the business law certificate. So if you take a certain number of classes, some are required, and then other electives throughout your 3 years, you can graduate with a certificate in business law. And actually, really, the way it's optimized is that you could roughly take just about half of your classes in business law and half in other things and still complete the certificate. Because we really believe much of what you need to know on a day-to-day basis, you'll learn from the job. And it's actually much better to have a more well-rounded legal education. So I just, why I asked that question and why I think it's an important point. And I remember my favorite class was criminal justice reform in California, taught with a former California district attorney who was progressive and on criminal law reform. So anyway, thanks, Aaron. I think what we'll do, maybe Aaron, I'll ask you to think about this and we'll come back to you. But if there's anything you wish you knew when you are in our prospective student shoes that you know now that you want to share. So think about that. But what we'll do is let's open it up for questions. I think that's it from our presentation. What I might ask you to do, because it's just more interactive, is if you want to ask a question, to use the hand raise feature. So in your Zoom toolbar, there's a button to raise your hand, and then I'll allow you to speak, and you can just say hi and ask your question. And please, if you can tell us where you're coming from. Okay, hi, Sarah.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good, thanks. How are you?
I am good. So I am coming from New York, Ithaca.
Okay.
And I am just wondering about more about the Women in Business Law initiative that you guys have there. It seems really interesting with like the mentorship and everything. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so that's a program that we run, and what we do is so throughout the semester we have like programs, panels, and then I think the meat of the program is we've compiled kind of a group of mentors, folks from law firms, folks from government, attorneys from companies. And then for anyone that wants to, each year we match our 1L students with one of those mentors, and then they're able to kind of collaborate. We do some networking activities for them, but that's kind of the core of that program. And then we do some thought leadership around that on gender inclusion more broadly in the law, working with some big organizations, et cetera. We fund others, research, scholarship, but I think for our law students, the core program is that mentorship program.
Awesome, thank you so much for that.
Thanks, Sarah. Spencer.
Hi, yes, thank you. So I'm coming in from, can you hear me?
Yeah,
okay,
loud and clear.
I'm coming in from rural Michigan, and thank you very much for putting this on. Actually, is Aaron still on there? Because I had kind of a follow-up question.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So my question is largely about that cryptocurrency regulation course that you mentioned, which is extremely interesting. I'm wondering if there were any particular, let's say, definitive or very confident measures that will be taken in the near future that the lawyer disclosed to you that you could tell us about, as well as, I'm not sure what the chronology was, but as a follow-up with Morrison Foerster, were there any situations where you were able to see or, let's say, apply some degree of financial regulation regarding cryptocurrency with any maybe client cases while you were a associate there, summer associate?
As long as you don't trade on any of this information, Spencer.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, so for the cryptocurrency class, I think sort of the main takeaway is that no one really knows what to do about any of this because it's so new. And the people that seem to understand it are these hyper specialized engineers, and Congress is ultimately kind of in charge of figuring out how to regulate this, and they're not really well positioned to, just because of how technical it is and how hard it is to understand for most people. So kind of the takeaway was that no one really knows where it's going to go, but I think there's the SEC and the Commodities and Futures Trade Commission basically are fighting over jurisdiction about how to regulate cryptocurrencies and whether they'd be considered securities. And for your second question about working at Morrison & Foerster, I didn't get a chance to work with anything cryptocurrency related there, but I did get to work on securities litigations cases, like shareholder disputes, company allegedly wrongfully discloses some information and people trade on that information, then the stock price goes down and then there's a suit. So that was primarily what my experience was at MoFo.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
And Spencer, anyone else interested? I last month interviewed the chief legal officer of Ripple, and we talked largely about regulatory issues, and it's available on YouTube. So I just sent the link for that interview if you're curious.
Awesome. I'll be giving that a watch. Thank you, Adam.
Got it. Any other questions, comments, or folks that want to say hi? Okay, Emma. Hi.
Hi, my name's Emma. I'm from Evanston, Illinois, and that's where I am currently right now. I'm more interested in the public interest side of business, like antitrust, things like that. And I was just wondering if you could like roughly say what percentage of the business focus class have a policy or public interest focus, if it's like 50 or like kind of lower on the end or higher. I was just curious about that.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably 50 and trending to a higher number, right? I mean, so our biggest area of growth is kind of around sustainability, governance, ESG, the purpose of the corporation, stakeholder theory, and that's where I see the most growth and probably our most popular choruses. And then on if you include the regulatory stuff, which has just become massive, from antitrust to CFIUS, which is the Committee on Foreign Investment in the US, and those have just become really big issues. I think we have our core antitrust class, for example, and then 3 or 4 antitrust electives. So it's a huge part of the curriculum, and probably I'd say beyond 50% if you force me to put a number on it.
Great, thank you so much. That's really exciting because that's like exactly what I want to do.
Cool. Yeah, it's a great. I mean, it's a really important space. And then we bring a lot of, I think, regulators as well to campus and through our programs. I'll put a link up here. We run a big conference each year on corporate governance. It starts tomorrow and goes through Friday. It's going to be live streamed on Zoom events, and we have like a whole camera. It's going to be really nice. But if you go to the berkeleyforum.com, you can register, and you don't have to attend the whole thing. But like, for example, we have the director of corporation finance from the SEC, and then some other really big names coming to speak. So take a look at that. But we do kind of 2 of those big conferences each year. But you'll see, like, day 2 is almost all about regulatory issues.
Great, thank you for the link.
Yeah. Now, does anyone know what the Socratic method is? Aaron, you probably know now, Aaron. Did you know coming in?
Yeah, I did, just from working in a legal department and sort of just hearing about it from practicing attorneys.
Yeah, and if you watch any movie about law school or portrayal of law school, it's dramatized quite well. But the basic idea is that your professor will teach largely by asking you questions, and then you'll just always be randomly called upon to speak. And so you always have to be prepared to respond. And so that's the extreme version of it. I think it's gotten to the point at Berkeley and most law schools where at most, right, you're probably on call, meaning, your professor will say, and this may happen only a couple times a semester, like, Aaron and these other 10 other folks should be prepared to speak today if I call on them. And then after your first year, it kind of goes away. But is that so I just bring that up to say I won't call on you all, but we'd love your questions or comments if you have them, or just introductions. But Aaron, was that your experience?
Yeah, it was my experience. And I think I've only been in one class where you weren't notified in advance that you might be on call. which is nice. So you're not just called out of the blue while you're daydreaming. You have some advance notice that you should be a little more on point. But I think some of the best advice I've gotten, and it might be a little bit unconventional, is kind of keeping in the back of your mind that no one really knows anything. So if you fumble a cold call and you're embarrassed or something and someone else completely killed it, or it seemed like they did, at the end of the day, you're basically on the same playing field as everyone else. So that kind of thought has always helped me sort of deal with like the potential anxiety of getting called on or feeling embarrassed, and also kind of applies to other things in life, particularly in law, where it seems like there's a lot of people who know what they're doing, but they encounter things all the time that they are solving that they've never experienced before.
100%. Great advice. I remember I had a professor that she would, if you came into class late, she would cold call you, which basically means calling you when you're unprepared as you are making your way into the classroom. I never understood why people would still show up late, either come early or don't come at all. But anyway, it's beside the point. And I don't know, I would just encourage everyone, I think Berkeley, our peer law schools, they're all great. I'm sure you're all great people. I think you're going to have great career opportunities wherever you go. And so, as you kind of look at your options, I'd really encourage you to think about like where you think you'll have the best time, meet as many students as you can, faculty, staff, and just see who you connect with. Because if you're making the decision purely from a resume perspective, although I think you'll do great with us, if not better than elsewhere, I don't think that's necessary. I think thinking about, it's 3 years of your life and where you'll really enjoy those 3 years, because you'll make connections that will last a lifetime, not just personally like me, but professionally as well. I'd say almost every kind of professional thing I've done or success I've had, I've leveraged someone I've met or I knew from law school, whether I went to law school with them or they were alumni of the law school. And so it's just a really special community. Looks like maybe there's another question. Christopher.
Hi, yeah, I'm coming from Seattle. I was wondering what type of courses you guys had in corporate finance law or like investment law. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a wide variety. So we actually have a corporate finance chorus, which is kind of a hybrid business school style law chorus that we offer. And it's kind of one of our core choruses. What we found actually was, so you can take classes at Berkeley at other graduate departments. You can get up to credit for up to 8 units, law school credit for classes you take elsewhere. But what happens is it's usually like electives at other campuses. And so like at the business school, corporate finance was not an elective, so our students couldn't get into it. So a few years ago, we actually started offering it regularly to our students. So we have like kind of a core course in corporate finance, a lot of electives, and then kind of if you think about different sorts of asset classes and corporate finance, from venture capital, we have a ton, to private equity, leverage buyouts, we have a lot. We have a capital markets and IPO chorus. So there's a ton. We have courses on the fund side. So actually fund management courses for folks that are going to work at investment funds. So it's pretty broad. And again, I sent that link out for our business, our schedule of classes, and would encourage you to look at that. But thanks, great question. Shenyang.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi.
Hi, thank you, Adam, for the useful information. So I actually go by Vic. You can call me Vic. So I have a few questions about the startup at Berkeley Law, and so I'm quite interested in the new business practicum and the IP lab seminar and practicum. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about both, and especially the latter. So I'm not a STEM major, and I don't have any prior training in, say, tech. But I'm very interested in IP regulations, and especially reading that some of the students participate in the life science startups patent landscape and studies. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and so a lot of that goes through our sister center, the Center for Law and Technology. And so I don't know if Chelsea, if they're going to do a session, but definitely you should check them out. That's the Berkeley Center for Law and Technology. And we are #1 in IP, and we have been for a number of years. And I would say, just like from careers in IP, certainly there's the route of kind of patent prosecution, folks with STEM backgrounds, but an even bigger kind of larger career path is kind of around like tech trans or IP groups, where you're doing more consulting with companies on intellectual property issues. So and a lot of our students go into that. And then actually, for most companies, their first legal hire is usually kind of an IP tech trans attorney. So when we say IP, intellectual property, there's a lot of kind of career paths that come out of that, from both the transactional and litigation side. And so I think by no means is not having a STEM background a barrier there for folks that are interested in IP. The new community business law clinic, yeah, it's just one of our clinics. And so I think you basically apply during your as early as your second year. And it's basically like a little legal practice where you're actually under the supervision of attorneys, but providing legal services to organizations in need. Oh, and Chelsea tells us that the Center of Law and Technology actually already did a session last week, and she'll be posting it to the website in the next week or so. And I'm confident that they addressed student opportunities like this. All right. Any final questions before? Yeah, you got it, Vic. Before I go back to Aaron to tell us what he wished he knew. So Aaron, think about it while I check for final questions. Riley is going to save Aaron and give him more time to speak.
Hi.
Hey, Riley.
I'm coming to you from Huntington Beach, California, so a couple hours away. But I was wondering what the overlap was like, because you mentioned you were able to take some electives in the business school, and then if I was going to do an MBA JD program, could those overlap, or how does that work?
Yeah, so if you're not doing a joint degree, you can get up to 8 units. So you can take, let's say, 4 2-unit classes at other graduate departments, and then those will count towards your basically law school elective credits, which you'll need to graduate. The challenge there is usually just finding those courses that have, it obviously has to be a course where there's open enrollment that aren't full. So like a business school, this makes sense, right? Is going to prioritize their business school students, but if there's elective still with space in it, you can enroll in those. And then for example, each semester, the business school will share with us a list of classes that still have availability. It's always a pretty great list. If you decide to do a joint degree, so for the JD MBA, you can apply basically anytime up to through your second year. And what most students do is they'll do their first 2 years at the law school, then they'll do their third year at the business school, and then their fourth year, they'll often take just classes at both.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, I will hop in and say that there are some classes taught jointly between the schools. I know you kind of mentioned this, Adam,
Yeah.
But some will be, you could take classes that have a mix of the business students and also law students, which is pretty interesting and sort of provides you with best of both worlds.
Yeah. And we have a lot of extra, so we actually just wrapped up, we do an annual for first year law students negotiations program where you pair up with a business school student, and then you compete against other pairs of law school and business school students for like negotiating real deals like around M&A and financing. It's really a fantastic program, super popular. We just wrapped up this year's. Anthony.
Yes, thank you. I'm Anthony Palzel. I'm calling in from Colgate University in upstate New York. I'm an econ major, so these topics are very interesting to me. I'm just wondering, what are like the big differences between the law and economics area of study and the business and startup area of study? And do a lot of students concentrate in both areas or not generally?
Yeah, great question, Anthony. So, most of our students come to law school and treat it as a professional school, right? And you leave law school and you're going on the business law side, you're going into either a career at a big law firm, government, or clerking, maybe in Delaware or somewhere that has overlap with business law, going to the SEC, et cetera. And so when I think about kind of the business law or startup curriculum, I think it's largely geared towards kind of the preparing you for the practice of law. I think the law and economics curriculum is twofold. One, it tends to be more, I'd say, academic. And so for someone that maybe wants to go on and pursue a career in academia. So we have a law and economics workshop each semester that brings in different academics to present their papers and their research. So that is one way I would break it down. Also, the law and economics is a lot of overlap with someone mentioned early, antitrust, right, and competition. And so we do a lot with like the economics department around that. So that's kind of how I would break it down, maybe.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, I'll pause for make sure there are no final questions. Oh, and Pablo, hi. Can you hear me? I'm going to embarrass. So, hey, how are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, good, great to see. So, Pablo, I guess I don't know, 4 years ago was an undergraduate fellow when he was at Berkeley with our center. Good to see you.
It's great to see you as well. It's great to see so many people here, and it's great to see everything's running so smoothly and so well.
Yeah, well, you have to hit me up. Let me know how I can be helpful, and hope we see you back as a law student. Same with all of you, but I'm great to see you again, or at least your voice and your name.
Great to see you as well.
All right, Aaron, we'll go back to you. Okay, what do you know now that you wish you knew a couple years ago when you were a prospective student?
I think something before I started working, at least, and now that I figured out sort of in the last year, is sort of the importance of your network and whatnot. And I think you kind of touched on this earlier, Adam, with sort of leveraging your Berkeley colleagues when you were a law student here. But I think something that's often overlooked and it is kind of has lost importance, I think, especially in law school, because it's so academic and focused on getting the highest grades you can, is the importance of network. And I think Berkeley has done a particularly great job of that. Especially I'm interested in practicing in San Francisco, and its proximity to that really helps. Adam's been a great resource for connecting students and myself with attorneys at law firms that you're interested in. I've had the same experience with my professors if they happen to work at the same firm that I'm interested in. So I think like during all this, I think I would keep the importance of network in your mind, because in a lot of ways it could get you just as far or potentially further than just pure academic credentials or what you have listed on your resume.
I love it. I didn't warn Aaron that I was going to ask that, so that was really good. I cold called him. Okay, so Chelsea, anything else you need us to address? I will put. Looks like we're good. I will put my email address again in the chat box if anyone wants to reach out, schedule time to chat one-on-one. But thanks for your interest, and I hope it works out. Hope that we see you on campus as an admitted student. Oh, let me send that to everyone, sorry. And Aaron, thanks so much I know we're rapidly approaching final season if we're not formally there. So thanks for taking some time out to chat with our prospective students.
Yeah, of course. Good luck to everyone.
Thanks, Adam, and thanks, Aaron. Have a good one.